You know that feeling when the world goes quiet?
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of us, that sudden lack of, external noise can feel, well, a bit unsettling.
Yeah, almost like something's missing.
Exactly. We're just so used to the constant buzz, phones, notifications, always something happening.
It's true. We're kind of wired for noise now, aren't we? So when it all stops.
It's a real shift. It can feel awkward,
Yeah.
even a little lonely.
It's fascinating, really, how modern life has almost conditioned us to fear silence.
Hear it, yeah.
We're so used to that external input that when it's gone, it feels like this void we need to fill instantly.
Right. But what if, and this is what we're getting into today, what if we could actually change that reflex?
Change how we react.
Yeah. What if those quiet moments, instead of feeling like, lonely silence, could actually become something we look forward to, something
Oh,
joyful?
that's a powerful idea. Moving beyond just tolerating it.
Totally. That's the core of our deep dive today.
Hmm.
We want to explore how we can genuinely redefine our relationship with being alone and maybe find some real contentment just
Yeah.
in our own company.
Thinking about it, it's really about a fundamental shift, isn't it? How we perceive solitude itself.
Shifting perception.
Yeah, moving from seeing it as like a state of lack
Something missing.
to recognizing its potential,
Yeah.
seeing it as a rich, valuable experience in its own right.
Okay, so to help us unpack all of this, we're looking at a couple of really helpful resources.
Right?
First, there are insights from Embracing the Silence, a guide to joyful me time. Got some practical stuff in there.
Good. Practical is needed.
And really importantly, we're focusing quite a bit on the amazing work of the LPot community.
Ah, yes. They're doing some fantastic things.
They really are. They're completely dedicated to transforming how we understand loneliness
Yeah.
and how we experience being alone, shifting that whole narrative.
Which brings us, I think, to the central question for you, the listener. How can we actually move beyond just, putting up with being alone?
To actually finding joy,
Yeah.
real fulfillment.
Exactly. In our own company. That's what we really want to dig into. And we'll be looking closely at how the LPot community is tackling this very challenge.
Okay, so let's start there then.
Yeah.
That initial pushback, that resistance we often feel towards silence. Why do we sometimes just automatically grab our phone or, turn on the TV when things get quiet?
Well, embracing the silence touches on this quite insightfully. It points out, first, just our ingrained habit.
The habit, yeah.
Seeking that external stimulation, the endless scroll, the notification ping. It's almost automatic.
Our muscle memory.
Kind of, but it suggests there's something deeper, too. Silence. It creates an opening.
An opening.
For introspection, for turning inward. And sometimes that turning inward can bring up feelings or thoughts that, well, maybe we're consciously or unconsciously trying to avoid.
Okay, so it's like the noise keeps a lid on things. And when the noise goes,
Poof, things start bubbling up.
right. And maybe we're just not quite ready for those uninvited guests in our own minds.
That's a good way to put it. But here's where it gets interesting. And this really connects with the perspective that the LPot community champions.
Okay.
That initial discomfort, it doesn't necessarily mean being alone is inherently bad or negative.
It's just discomfort.
Exactly. And as the LPot community often emphasizes, that feeling can actually be the gateway. The
No.
first step towards some really positive growth and self-discovery.
Okay, that reframes it quite a bit. Not a stop sign, but maybe a yield sign.
Or even a detour this way for interesting insight sign.
I like that. Which leads us nicely into this idea of joyful me time, or as the guide calls it, soul care.
Soul care, yeah. That's a lovely term.
It really is. It immediately reframes time alone as something active, something beneficial, not just the absence of other people or noise.
Absolutely. And this is something both the guide and the LPot community really stress. Dedicating time to yourself isn't selfish.
It feels like we need that reminder sometimes.
We do. It's fundamental. It's a core part of looking after your overall well-being. Think of it as actively tending to your inner world, nurturing your inner landscape.
Okay, nurturing your inner landscape. And what are the potential fruits of that nurturing? What comes out of that quiet space?
Well, the guide lists some pretty significant potential benefits, things like a calmer nervous system.
Okay, most of us could use that.
Definitely. Increased creativity, better focus,
Uh-huh.
more emotional clarity, getting a better handle on how you're really feeling, and ultimately a deeper connection to yourself, to
Yeah.
your values, to what truly matters to you.
Wow. That's quite a list. That's a serious return on investment for just, being quiet for a bit.
It really is. And what's fascinating here, and it lines up perfectly with the LPot community's focus on self-discovery,
Yeah.
is that this isn't just about passive rest, like collapsing on the couch. It's active restoration.
Active restoration.
Yeah, and it's an opportunity. Silence provides the space needed for your inner voice, your intuition, whatever you want to call it, to actually be heard.
Without all the other noise drowning it out.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're getting the why we resist it and what the potential benefits. But for a lot of people, the big hurdle is the how.
Right. The practicalities.
Yeah. How do we actually start cultivating this joyful me time, especially when our default setting is reach for distraction?
Well, embracing the silence offers some really accessible first steps, and they're, surprisingly manageable, not overwhelming.
Good.
One key suggestion, and you see this echoed in the practical advice from the LPot community too, is simply to start small.
This is all how.
Like really small, even just 10 minutes. Setting aside 10 minutes for quiet can have a real impact.
Just 10 minutes.
Yeah. Turn off the notifications, maybe just focus on your breath. It's a powerful, simple starting point.
10 minutes feels doable. It's not like you're saying, go on a silent retreat tomorrow.
Not at all. It's about building the muscle slowly. And the guide also talks about creating a dedicated, quiet space.
Ah, like a specific spot.
Exactly. And this resonates with that idea of intentionality that the LPOT community talks about.
Yeah.
Having a specific chair or corner or even just a cushion somewhere in your home that you associate with peace and quiet.
Like signaling to your brain, this is the quiet spot.
Precisely. Maybe light a candle, have a cozy blanket, a plant, whatever makes it feel like your sanctuary, a place you actually want to go to for that stillness.
A personal haven. I like that. Okay, what else?
Then there's the big one, especially today, consciously unplugging.
Oof, yeah, disconnecting from the devices.
It feels almost radical sometimes, doesn't it? But it's crucial for reconnecting with yourself.
The LPot community must talk about this a lot.
They really advocate for this intentional disconnection. It's framed as a conscious choice, choosing to be present with yourself instead of being constantly available to everything else.
Making yourself reachable to yourself.
That's a great way to put it. You see this reflected in how they encourage specific self-care practices during solo time, things that don't involve screens.
Okay, that makes total sense. It's a deliberate choice. And then the guide mentions listening, just listening to your thoughts without judging.
Yes, passive observation, not immediately jumping in to analyze or fix or distract yourself from what comes up.
That sounds challenging, especially if the thoughts are uncomfortable.
It can be, but it's key to dealing with that initial discomfort we talked about. It's about creating space for whatever is there without needing to react instantly. The LPot community, through their resources and discussions, really encourages this kind of self-acceptance.
Non-judgmental observation, okay?
Learning to just be with what is. It's central to finding peace in your own company.
Right. And one more practical tip from the guide.
Doing one thing slowly, mindfully.
Single tasking. Is that even possible anymore?
It takes practice. But yeah, like really paying attention while you make a cup of tea, feeling the warmth of the mug, smelling the aroma, tasting it, or stretching, or just walking slowly, noticing your feet on the ground.
Bringing focus to simple actions.
Exactly. It's incredibly grounding. It pulls you out of that rushed, frantic feeling and lets you find little pockets of peace, even in mundane activities. And again, the LPOT community often highlights these simple, mindful practices as ways to build contentment from within.
Okay, these individual strategies, starting small, quiet space, unplugging, listening, single tasking, they all make sense. But what really grabs me is the whole approach of the LPot community.
How so?
Well, they're not just talking about individual techniques, right? They're actively building a community around this very idea of embracing aloneness differently.
That's spot on, and that's where their impact is potentially huge. The LPot community, you see it on their website, lpots.com, their YouTube, their Discord server. They are fundamentally dedicated to reframing alone time.
Changing the story around it.
Completely. Moving it away from being seen as a deficit, something wrong or sad, and towards being seen as a positive opportunity. They're working hard to dismantle those negative stereotypes.
That feels like such important work. Shifting the narrative from just lonely to potentially content or even fulfilled. when alone.
Exactly. Their core message, woven through everything they do, is that real happiness, genuine fulfillment, it starts from within.
Right.
And they see time spent alone, when you approach it intentionally, as a vital path to finding that inner contentment and boosting self-discovery.
And it's not just philosophy, is it? They seem very focused on practical support.
Very much so. It's not just abstract ideas. They offer concrete, real-world advice on self-care routines you can do alone, on thinking about how to design a life that actually aligns with your personal values, finding purpose even when you're by yourself.
That feels really empowering.
It is, and their online presence, with that really open message, all are welcome, it drives home that this isn't about pushing people into isolation.
No, it's the opposite almost.
Kind of, yeah. It's about fostering a healthy, strong relationship with yourself. And they provide this incredibly supportive community space for people who are on that journey. You see it in their hashtags, too.
Yeah, I noticed those. Things like hashtag loneliness, hashtag community, hashtag mental health support.
Right, showing they understand the challenges people face, but also hashtag being alone, hashtag feeling lonely, alongside hashtag holiday support. They're meeting people where they are, offering connection and resources.
And they really encourage interaction, don't they? Likes, comments, subscriptions, building that shared space. They even provide an email, lpotsonline@gmail.com, for direct contact.
It all builds that sense of shared experience and support, which beautifully illustrates how those individual practices we talked about, the starting small, the unplugging, can be massively boosted and reinforced.
How so?
By connecting with a community like the LPot community who get it, who understand the goal. It's not an either. You don't have to choose between personal solitude practices and community support.
They can work together.
Absolutely. They can strengthen each other. Finding that network of people who value this journey of self-discovery through alone time, it can make all the difference.
It really normalizes it, doesn't it? It's not about avoiding connection with others. It's about building a stronger foundation within yourself first. And having that community cheering you on, sharing tips that reinforces everything.
Perfectly put. Which brings us back to that fundamental idea. Silence isn't empty.
Right. The guide said it's full of you.
Exactly. Full of your presence, your thoughts, your feelings, your potential, your wisdom.
Yeah.
And the LPot community is essentially encouraging everyone to explore that fullness, to embrace it.
That's such a huge shift in perspective, isn't it?
Yeah.
From seeing alone time as just waiting for the next social thing or something to fill the gap, to seeing it as a valuable space in itself, a destination, not just a waiting room.
That's it, precisely. Moving away from me time being just filler and recognizing it as a worthwhile, enriching experience. And the LPot community's whole mission seems geared towards empowering people to see and feel that inherent value. Their final message seems to be, you are enough exactly as you are.
So wrapping this up, the key takeaway here, really amplified by the work and dedication of the LPot community, is the incredible power we have in just reframing.
The power of perspective.
Yeah. How we choose to view being alone. It doesn't have to be the state we fear or avoid. It can genuinely be an opportunity for self-discovery, for restoration, for finding a deeper kind of contentment.
And it bears repeating. This isn't about shutting the world out. It's not about isolation. It's about cultivating a stronger, more resilient, more fulfilling relationship with yourself first. And as the LPot community beautifully demonstrates, that stronger self-relationship can absolutely exist alongside and even enhance meaningful connections with other people.
So, maybe a question for you, the listener, thinking about everything we've discussed, especially the encouraging work of the LPot community. How do you currently approach your moments of solitude, your time alone? And maybe what's one small intentional step you could take, perhaps this week, to start embracing a slightly more positive, maybe even a joyful perspective on your own company?
It leads to a final thought to ponder, doesn't it?
What's that?
Could our capacity to be truly content when we're alone, something the LPot community champions so passionately, could that actually be the very foundation, the bedrock for building stronger, more resilient, more meaningful connections with everyone and everything else around us?
That's definitely something to think about. Finding strength within to connect better without.
It's a compelling idea,